All right, so as we're plowing through Bava Metzia, getting toward the end, I wanted to spend a little bit on the topics from last weekend's Daf Yomi. There are many mitzvos, mainly lotases, when it comes to malve and love, when it comes to laws of lending money, right? As we know, as we've seen, that there are many prohibitions. And I think the Rambam lists 12, and there are five of them, I believe, that are specific just to the concept of taking a mashkon. Okay, and that's what the very end of Bava Metzia talks about. We've had the last 5-6 days before we started the last chapter a couple of days ago. We spent a lot of time analyzing the various mitzvos of taking collateral, basically the do's and the don'ts of taking collateral. And the Mishnah starts on Daf Kuf Yud Gimel. Okay, let me just open up my photos over here. Okay, so the Mishnah on Daf Kuf Yud Gimel says Hamalves Chaver lo yimshakenu ela bebezdin. So first of all, to start things off, the Mishnah says that it's a good idea to get bezdin involved. Meaning, if you want to take a mashkon, okay, after time went by and the loan wasn't paid, okay, and you say, I think you need an incentive to pay me back. So the mitzvah, at least, is to get bezdin involved. Okay, you don't go to his house, as we're going to see. You don't just rip it out of his hands. You act like a mensch, and you take him to bezdin. The Mishnah goes on to elaborate, right? We're going to have one prohibition now, that you can't go into his house, barge in, and start taking his utensils. Shenemar bachutz tam. Okay, you have to stand outside, and the borrower, should come out and greet you and give you the mashkon. Shenemar bachutz tamod hayu shnei kelim notel echad meniach echad. And the Mishnah goes into detail about, well, what can you take, what can't you take? And if you take his pillow, then, on the one hand, you need security that he's going to remember to pay you back. On the other hand, you can't torture him, right, by taking his pillow, because then he can't sleep. Okay? Okay, so the Mishnah goes on to say that there's some kind of kinyan that the malva makes. Okay, so therefore the yorshim who typically don't have to subjugate their property to creditors, this is an exception. Okay, then, so that's really the end of the Mishnah. I wanted to spend some time on going over the various lavim. So when you look at the Sefer HaChinuch, okay, and Parshas Kitetse is where all the fun starts. Okay. Midinei HaMitzvah, I'm reading Mitzvah 583. Okay. This is the mitzvah. Okay. This is the mitzvah of not taking too much, okay, from the borrower. Midinei HaMitzvah Masha Amru Zichronim Levracha Shebe'inyan Iser Zeh. I'm sorry, am I reading the wrong one? Okay, 583, right? So the mitzvah is Shebe'inyan Iser Zeh Ein Chiluk Ben Shemashkin Biyado or Alpi Bezdin B'chol Tzad Chayev Alehen V'im Chabal Machzir Noso Bezdin Bal Korcho. If you took and you went into their house, right? So then Bezdin actually has to rip it out of the hands of the malva and gives it back to the loba. Okay, upershu moreno yishmurim el. And we have a interpretation from our rabbis. She'isr zeh eino ela kishamishken hakelim hanizkarin shelo b'shas halva. Ava b'shas halva vadai mutar lamashken kol kelim sheba'olam. Okay. Let me just open up. I'm sorry. Let me open up the beginning of the mitzvah because I started from the middle. So I'm reading. Sorry about that. 583. Okay. So, right. So this is the mitzvah of not taking a mashkon of someone who is, let's say, a baker, you can't take his oven. Someone who grinds, you can't take his grinder. Right? That's what we call kelim she'osin behen ochel nefesh. Okay. So we're not allowed to take something that's very important. That's their livelihood. Okay. Kagon, he says, klei hatchina, klei halisha, right? You're kneading, pin, your bowls, your pots, right? Your knife, if you shecht animals, right? Dabar she'osin bo ochel nefesh. It says, lo yachbol rechayim varechev ki nefesh hu chovel. Okay, that's the pasuk we're going to talk about. That's the pasuk in Kitetse. Lo yachbol rechayim varechev ki nefesh hu chovel. You can't take the millstone, right? We learned in the Mishnah a few days ago that the mill had a top piece and a bottom piece. Okay, and you'd grind by putting the wheat or whatever in the middle. And that's how you would grind. So the prohibition is to take something very important that produces food. Okay, so that's number 583. So the chinuch, his comment, okay, is when are you taking this mashkon? Are you taking it at the time of the loan, which is called b'shas halva, or are you taking it after a few weeks when you see that he's not paying you back? Okay, so the chinuch is of the opinion that it's only shelo b'shas halva, is that he wasn't paying you back, so you went. So his point is, if you set up the whole loan predicated on the fact that as soon as you gave him money, which he requested to borrow, to take a security at that point, then that's 100% okay. After all, don't you want an incentive, right, for him to pay you back? So you can take whatever you want. And the chinuch proves it by saying, the lo gara memecher, it's not any worse than actually, right, if this was a sale, she'ein monin lo la'adam milim kol kelev olam ashkenan. A person's allowed to sell, right? He could sell his last kitchen utensil if he wants to. He could give it away. So too, he could give it away to a lender who demands some kind of deposit, who demands some kind of security deposit. Okay, and the chinuch doesn't usually go against the Rambam, but the chinuch is basically saying that many great minds made a mistake. Okay, he's basically disagreeing with the Rambam because the Rambam himself, I'm quoting from the Mishnah Torah in Hilchos Malba Volova Perigimol. It doesn't matter if the mashkon came on day one or it came later. OLP Bezdin, lo yachbol kelim she'osin behen ochel nefesh. You are not allowed to, in any circumstance, take a kli that he needs to live from, i.e., to bake food with. Right, the cauldrons that they would boil water with and cook v'sakin shel shchita and the shchita knife, right? And the imchavu machzir bal korcho. And what if he did break this rule and the lender took it? So we force the lender to give it back. All right. And what if he can't give it back because he lost it? So the Rambam actually says, "V'im avad hamashkon or nisraf kodim sheyachzir loke." Wow, the person's actually chayiv malchus. This malva is chayiv malchus for taking security, which is impossible to return because it either burned up or he lost it. Okay, so we see a very, very rare occurrence where the chinuch, who 99% of the time agrees with the Rambam, does not agree with the Rambam. And he maintains, again, that if the deal was from the beginning that it was going to be a mashkon, okay, that involved something very important to the world of the lova, he is allowed to take it as long as he took it, as long as the malva took it from day one. Okay, the Minchas Chinuch in his commentary, okay, brings down this statement by the Sefer HaChinuch, and he says, Varamach Michlalam Sovrim Dalav Ze'eno Rak Shul B'Shas Halva. Right, he quotes what the Chinuch just said, that what the Noten Halova Mirtzono Mutter. If the Lova decides to give it to him from day one, it's not a problem. Ve'en kan shum iser. Achtas HaRambam kan, of course, he brings the Minchas Chinuch brings down the Rambam, Dal Kli Eino Over. Eino Over Af Bishas Halva B'kulam Hikshu Alav Bazeh. V'Haramach Kasav Shetau B'Gdolei Ha'olam Lo Hiskinu Shmo Shel Rabbeinu Hagadol B'nei HaKavod. The Chinuch doesn't bring down the name of the Rambam. He just brings down B'Shem Gadol. And the Raavad also has a problem with the Rambam. So basically, a lot of people have a problem with this Rambam, the Rush and the Tur. Okay, so v'hinei kushidzu eno kusha kol kach the gzeres hakasav kamo ribis. So the Minchas Chinuch says, don't ask such a question, meaning don't think that just because the Love on day one agreed to give a mashkon, that means that it's okay. It doesn't mean just because you agree something, does that mean that you can't be over a lav? Says the Minchas Chinuch. What about, right? Ein is a kusha kohak the gzeros hakasav kamo ribis denosan matana v'yachalita and kol mamono b'matanu mikol makom beid halva aser afal pishanot lo mirtzano hatov. Right? Just because the lova agrees on day one, let's say hypothetically, to pay interest, does that mean that it's mutter? No, says the Minchas Chinuch. So too, if you decide for whatever reason to give a mashkon that's very important to you, that you need to live off of, it's still aser, even though the lova agreed. Hachinami aser hator b'toras mashkon afal pi shemakira mutar ugzeres hamelachu mi amad besod Hashem chukahi. He says it may not make sense. After all, the malva needs some kind of security, but nevertheless, it's still alive. So we have a very, very big machlokes in Rishonim, right? Whether or not this lav is committed. Now, where this is in the Torah is a very interesting location. We've mentioned several times that, first of all, Parshas Kiteitzei, okay, holds the record for the most. I think there's 74 mitzvos, either 74, 76. I think 74 mitzvos out of the 613. And if you know Kiteitzei very well, one of the oddities of Kiteitzei is the fact that there are many mitzvos, as we said, but they're interspersed. There's no seemingly order. It's all random, right? And we've noted before that sometimes when there's two seemingly unrelated mitzvos right next to each other, there's a reason. Like, for example, the famous example is Lo Sachsom Shor B'Disho, which is the prohibition of muzzling your animals, happens to come right before the chapter of Malchus, Bezin giving you Malchus. So we have a reason why they're connected, right? We said a number of months ago, if you remember, I think it was the comment of the Sforno that brings down that why is the Parsha of Boshes, remember the story where the two men are fighting, the woman comes in, saves her husband, right, and grabs him. That whole discussion is right after Chalitza, And there's a connection between when a woman can embarrass someone by spitting, right, which is chalitza, and when a woman can't embarrass. So we already know that there's these tangential connections between two seemingly unrelated topics. So if you look at the context, okay, in chapter 24, okay, chapter 24 starts off by talking about the rules of divorce. Okay, the first four psukim talk about divorce. The fifth pasuk, a favorite of mine, talks about the prohibition, what we call shana rishona. All right, the first year, you have to simach es ishto asher lakach, right? You have to rejoice with your wife, and you're free from army duty the first year. Great. What's the very next pasuk? Lo yachbol rechayim v'rechav kinefeshu chovel. If you happen to take a mashkon, someone's millstone, okay, if you happen to take a mashkon, you can't take someone's rechayim, someone's millstone that he uses to grind. Again, out of left field. Then, what's the pasuk after that? It talks about kidnapping. And what's the pasuk after that? It talks about negatzaras. And what's the pasuk after that? Zachar es asher asa Hashem elokecha leMiriam. Then what's the pasuk after that? When you go to someone's to take a mashkon, don't go into their house. So it's seemingly unrelated. It's almost like everything is haphazard. So I found, and this is a little segue because I couldn't really resist. I saw a very, very interesting Targum Yonasan. Okay, the Targum Yonasan says on this pasuk. Let me find it. Targum Yonasan says, "Lo yimshachun gvar rechayev v'racha." He says, yeah, you can't take a hand mill, okay, as a pledge, as security. Why? Because it makes food for everyone. And a man shall not join brides and grooms by magical incantations. Because the boy or the child that would be born would perish. So the Ibn Ezer jumps. Okay, you rarely see this. This is a machlokas between the Targum Yonasan and the Ibn Ezer on what in the world Shana Rishona has to do with Lo Yachbol Rechayim V'Rechav. I found this fascinating. Basically, the Targum Yonasan makes a connection somehow, I'm not exactly sure, but he talks about that you are not allowed to, by magic, refrain a newlywed from living with from a newlywed, couple in their first year from living with each other. Okay, to him, that's called taking someone's rechayim v'rechev. There's a lot of whatever. I don't want to get into the details. There's a lot of sexual innuendo over here that I don't really want to get into, but that's what the Targum Yonasan says. And I just want to read the Ibn Ezer. Ibn Ezer says, Amru hamachishim, the deniers, right? If you see the Ibn Ezer a lot, he likes to quote the people who disagree with a lot of pashut pshatz that the commentators talk about. So he says, Amru hamachishim ki nidbeka zos aparsha im v'simach es ishto ki remez lamishkav ki aser sheyimna min hamishkav. He says the connection between these two seemingly unrelated topics of Shana Rishona and taking a mashkon that's food related, okay, has to do with bia, right? Making someone abstain from sexual intercourse. He says, though, v'zeh hevel harik. And the Ibn Ezer goes on to say this is absolute nonsense, and he brings psukim and this and whatever it is. I just found it really, funny. Not funny. I just found it, fascinating how, sometimes we don't really get to learn these obscure laws, especially when they're in Kitetse, because they're like scattered all over the place. And here you have an opportunity to wonder why in the world does the Torah connect these two random facts, one against each other. But I don't know. I just wanted to throw that out. Um, the Netziv, by the way, does connect these two psukim. Smichas ha'azaras ha'archokos ma'od. The Netziv says these two commandments, which are seemingly absolutely unrelated, right? Be'inyan nitan lidarish ukfar nidrash b'zeh Targum Yonatan. So he does say that Targum Yonatan says something. Ufi apshat samach inyan dome ledome. He says there's two comparable things going on over here. Komoshe harechaim v'harechev. Okay, afagav shehem mamun bailim umishubadim lebalchov. Okay, again, these are on the one hand the lova owns this mill, but when you borrow money, you become meshubad to the lender. The lender has what we call this shibud, a lien, Lien, over you. Mikomakom kiven shenafsho, kiven shenafsho shel adam eno meshubad lebalchov. My mill maybe is meshubad to my balchov, but my soul is not. Right? Eno meshubad lebalchov. My nefesh is meshubad not to my balchov. V'rechaim v'rechev gormin lekiyum hanefesh. And the rechaim and rechev are my soul supporters. S-O-U-L, not S-O-L-E. They support my soul. I need to eat to live. And if I get and if I have my mill taken, then I have no way of supporting myself, and my soul will rot. So therefore, that's the reason why I can't take it. Hachinami. So what does this have to do with Shana Rishona? Now, what's Shana Rishona about? Remember, the first year that you're married, you're not allowed, right? You have an exemption from going to the army. Hachinami afagav shahadam hu meshubad lomelech or medina. I am meshubad. Right. This is a very timely topic, unfortunately. Even though I am meshubad to my country, to fight for my country, whether I like it or not. Mikol makom ishto eno chayeves bazeh hashibud. De'ein isha darko lichabesh. Women, according to the Torah, have a full-time exemption from the army. Why? Because the Gemara in Kedushin, way in the beginning, says it's not a derech for a woman to conquer. So therefore, there's like a struggle going on. I have a responsibility to my country, but on the other side, I have a responsibility to my wife. So which one dominates? Mishum hachi, Efshar lahavir alav gam shehu gorem lanafsho v'afagav dekomonosa isha chadash kenadin babona bais chadash. Okay, so he talks about it's also if you build a house, it's not necessarily getting married, but still, because I have this shibud to my wife, that trumps the shibud that I have to my country. All right, so he connects that to the same two shibudim that I have, one to my nefesh and one, right, to feed myself, and one to my balchov, who I really owe money to. So I thought that was a really neat netziv that talks about the connection. All right, we're going to jump now. Like I said, there are 5 separate lavim about the do's and the don'ts about taking a mashkon. So mitzvah number 585 talks about shalom mashkon bal chov bizroa. You can't take a mashkon by force. Okay, shenimnanu milishkon biadenu bal chov. Klomer halova el b'mitzvah hashofet al yidei shalucho. You have to do it nicely. You can't rip it out of his hands. You can't barge open his house and start taking his artwork. Okay, what's the reason? So you'd say, it sounds because you're not being a nice guy. So the Sefer Chinuch elaborates a little bit, and he says, Misharsha hamitzvah kedei shalo yihiyu b'nei adam kehefker v'yirba hachamas ba'aretz. We do this is so that we don't have Hamas, right? Violence and right, lootery going on in the world. You need some kind of right. You need some kind of civil order. Because the big one dominates the small, and we had this concept before a few weeks ago that you don't want the one who's a bigger bully to win, right? So therefore, you can't force it out of his hands. And the one who's inferior is always going to be living in fright. So therefore, you need some kind of equity. Okay. As the chinuch likes to say a lot, we want tikkun olam. We want yishav olam. We want people living nicely. Everyone, right? Everyone in peace. So that's what it says about that. We're going to, so that's a second example, okay, of a lav that's related to taking a mashkon. A third example comes from a Mishnah on Daf Kuf Tes Vav. All right, Daf Kuf Tes Vav. Daf Kuf Tes Vav in Bava Metzia says, Almana bein shehi aniya bein shehi ashira ema mashkin oso. So now we've spoken about the kind of kli, okay, something that you used to cook with. We spoke about doing it by force. Now we're going to talk about a specific kind of borrower. We know that the Torah hones in many, many, many times on the ger, yasom, and the almana. And believe it or not, there's a separate prohibition, number 591, that prohibits, okay, if the borrower is an almana, okay, you're not allowed to take a mashkan from her. Okay, special din just by a widow. Okay, almana bein shehi aniya, bein shehi ashira ema mashkan. So the Mishnah right in the middle of 115a says it doesn't matter if she is a Rockefeller or if she's homeless. It doesn't matter on the economic situation of the almana. Shenemar lo yachbol beged almana, because the pasuk says, okay, getting back to Kitetse, Perek 24, it says, did I lose the pasuk? I lost the pasuk, but it says lo tachbol beged almana. Okay, that's what the pasuk says. Says the Gemara. We're going to do the Gemara on this because this specific prohibition opens the door to a very, very famous topic, which is called Taima Dikra. Okay, the Gemara, in a few in a few instances, says that this is the paradigm of a machlokes that we use whether or not we're allowed to elaborate on the reasons why the Torah gave us certain prohibitions. Okay, so I'm going to start the Gemara. It's the first wide line on Kuf Tes Vav Amud Aleph. Tanar Bana. Almana bein shehi aniya bein ashira ein mamashkin osa divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, the Torah says again, lo tachbol beged almana. You can't take a mashkon. You can't take an article of clothing from the almana. Okay, so the first question we're going to discuss halachically is what are the two nouns, right? Each noun has a machlokes, the almana portion and the clothing portion. Actually, if you look in the Shulchan Aruch talks about this, okay? It actually has a three-way machlokes. I think the Sma, the Taz, and the Shach all get into it. And it's actually a machlokes. Does this only apply to an almana? Okay. Does it even apply to a grusha? Again, the Torah said almana. So maybe the Torah is worried about an almana, right? Almanas were historically always, they were always, downtrodden and they didn't have support, so life was much tougher for the almana. A grusha, not as much. Okay. And the third level is a pnuya. What about a regular woman who's not married? Okay. So believe it or not, each is a machlokas, whether it applies to an almana or a grusha or even a pnuya. So that's the one machlokas. The other machlokas in the Shulchan Aruch is it says beged. Is the Torah specific about beged, or could it be anything, or could it be her piano, not necessarily her dress? So there's all kinds of machlokas specifically in this topic of the almana. Okay, so that's just a side note. Okay, so let's read it. Almana ben Shiania ben Sheshir and Mashkana. So Rabbi Yehuda says the Torah doesn't say what kind of almana, so therefore it doesn't matter what her economic status is. Rabbi Shimon Omer Ashira memashkinosa, Aniya in memashkinosa. Rabbi Shimon says there's an exception if she is right. If she is Ashira, if she could afford it and has many dresses, so then there's no problem of taking a mashkon. Why? Because the whole problem is if she doesn't have a lot of clothing and you take the only clothing she has, you're going to have to return it to her. And if you return it to her, how's it going to look if every morning and every night you're going to be hanging around her house waiting for her to come out to take her clothing, to give her clothing? It's one of those things, as they say, pasnished. So therefore, people are going to think that she's sleeping around, and it's not really advisable. Okay? So therefore, I will paskin the law based on whether or not she could afford it, whether she has money or whether she doesn't have money. Now that's a very, very dangerous opinion, because we're looking at something that the Torah says, and we're coming to our own logic, and we're saying, well, it applies here and it doesn't apply there. And this sets off the whole topic that the Gemara is going to say, Lamemer Rabbi Yehuda lo darish tamid dekra. It sounds that because Rabbi Yehuda says, I don't care whether she could afford it or whether she could not afford it, hands off when it comes to taking a mashkin from an almana, it sounds like we don't really care what the Torah's potential reason is. Because if you start trying to find out what the reason is, then you might come to a different conclusion based on the economic status of the woman. And we don't want that to happen because the Torah doesn't say anything different, whether she could afford it or not. So therefore, how could we say anything different, right? It's like when you start giving reasons, right, then it applies sometimes and it may not apply other times. So that's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Okay? Rab Shimon, Darish Tamid, and Rab Shimon, who says, well, it depends. Is it her only dress? If it's her only dress, then you have to return it to her. And if you have to return it to her, then you're going to be hanging around her house at night, and it's not going to look so good. But that's only if you prescribe to the concept of Dorish Tamid Dekra, that we're trying to find the reason why the Torah specifically had an isolated prohibition for an almana. Okay? So the Gemara from here is going to go on to say that we have opposites opinion when it comes to a completely different subject found in Maseches Sanhedrin. Okay, the Gemara that we're going to quote now in Maseches Sanhedrin says the following: the Tanya, lo yarbe lo nashim. Okay, one of the prohibitions that a king has is that he can't marry too many wives. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, marbehu bilvad shelo yemasuras es libo. You could have as many wives as you want, as long as you behave. So says Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon Omer, afilu achas fihi mesira es libo reizolei yisa'ena. Rabbi Shimon says, no. You can't even marry one woman if you're not going to behave well with her, right? I say the word behave, the Gemara says the word mesiras libo, lead him astray. So the question is, is more, do you have a better chance of being led OTD if you have more wives? Okay, so this is a machlokas. Rab Shimon says, no, you could have just an awful outcome if you have one real bad wife. Okay, so therefore, even one wife who's bad you can't have. Forget about 20. Even one's a problem. So the Gemara says, so if you're telling me that if you marry one real witch, that's prohibited, then why did the Torah say that you can't have many women? If you look at Avigail, the answer is because if you get lucky and marry someone like David and Avigail, who was a tzaddikus, and she saved his life with the whole story of Naval, of Navos, right? That whole story, right? Where she saved his life. Even, right, if you have tzaddikises, after tzaddikises, you still can't have. So what do we see from this? We see from here, from this Gemara in Sanhedrin, that they flip-flop, right? Over there in Sanhedrin, by the case of the king's wives, it sounds like Rabbi Yehuda is Dorish Time at the Crow. Rabbi Yehuda says, I care about the reason, right? And therefore, if she's one, because the Torah gave a reason, then, right? Okay, so the Gemara goes on to say that Rabbi Yehuda, Lo'olam Rabbi Yehuda, Lo Darish Time at the Crow, V'shayni Hacha, the Parish Crow, V'lo Yarbel Nashim, V'lo Yasu. Rabbi Yehuda says, what are you talking about? I have to be Dorish Time at the Crow because the Torah goes out of its way. It says, don't take many wives. And you know what's going to happen if you do take too many wives? You're going to have a really bad outcome. So Rabbi Yehuda says, how could I argue when the Torah itself gives a reason? 98% of the time, the Torah doesn't give reasons. The Torah says, for example, right? You can't mix milk and meat together. Does it say the reason? No, it doesn't say the reason. Torah says to do all these kinds of things. It doesn't give a reason, right? What's the purpose of going to the mikveh? What does it do to you physically? It gives all these, and it doesn't give a reason. So the one time that the Torah gives a reason that you can't have too many women because they're going to lead you off the derech, then of course you have to be Dorish Time at Dikra. Okay? And Rav Shimon says just the opposite. Usually I say Dorish Time at Dikra. But here, because the Torah went out of its way with that it doesn't usually do, I'm going to learn just the opposite. Okay? And therefore I'm not going to be Dorish Time at Dikra. And therefore, even one who's bad, I can't marry. So that's how the Gemara ends. So I want to discuss this because it's a very, very, deep and I think misunderstood, like I said, a very misunderstood machlokes, because obviously, every week, I don't think there's ever been a week in the last 3 years where I didn't bring up a Sefer HaChinuch, right? We always learn one of the mitzvahs from the Sefer HaChinuch. And what is the chinuch? What was his goal? His goal was exactly this, to discuss the reason of the mitzvahs. So how could you tell me that there's a controversy whether or not we're allowed to figure out the reasons? So the obvious answer is that, yeah, it's important to discuss the reasons, right? To know what we're learning and to get a background. But what Dorish Time at Dikra is taking something from that the Torah said that we're not sure what the Torah had in mind, and getting a reason and making an application. Yeah, it's great to know Tamei HaMitzvos, why we do certain things, like we just said 10 minutes ago. Why is it a good thing not to barge into the house of the Loveh or to see him in the shuk and rip the mashkin out of his hands? Because the bigger people are going to dominate the smaller people, right? And you're going to have an imbalance, and who's ever bigger is going to win all the time. So that's not good for society. So that's what we call a no-brainer. That's not really Dorish Tami Dekra. That's giving a reasonable explanation as to why the Torah, right, has certain laws. Why does the Torah have laws of tzedakah? There are a lot of things that are logical, and you don't really need, a commentator to pen to figure out the reason. The problem though is when we have lo tachbol beged almana and the Torah doesn't talk about anything else. So then they're like, okay, well, what did the Torah have in mind? Is it permitted sometimes? Is it forbidden all the time? This is like a discussion of sometimes if we had reasons for everything, right, then maybe the law would be different. It's like, for example, if you're waiting at a red light at 3 o'clock in the morning and you could see for 3 miles around you that there are no cars coming, and you decide to run the red and a cop out of nowhere pulls you over and you say, listen, what's the right? And you give the cop, right, a whole pshetel. What's the reason why you have to stop at a red so that you don't hit the next car? I see all around me that there are no cars within miles. So why am I stopping at a red light at 3 a.m.? So it sounds like a compelling argument, right? But then again, maybe we shouldn't be giving reasons, right, for laws. So that's where this discussion, really takes us. And even so, if you look at the mitzvah, getting back to the Sefer HaChinuch, in 591, let's open it up. The Chinuch says, "Shenimnu milashkin es almanos." You can't take a mashkin from an almana. Misharshe hamitzvah. What's the reason? Shechas Hashem al briosa. God was concerned about people. V'ratza lezakotenu liknot benafshenu midot hachemla. All right, that we should have rachmanos for ourselves and for other people. V'tzivanu shenarachem al almana. When it comes to an almana, that's the utmost rachmanos that we have. Shalavava shavur v'doeg, because her heart is broken and she's always worried. Right? Again, the almana, she may not have parents and she has no husband to support. So she is the lowest of the low. That's why the Torah goes out of its way, right? How many times? Many, many times. Don't oppress the almana, don't oppress the almana. Every single week we read in the Torah, leave the almana alone, right? Just for that reason. Shalvava shavar v'doeg shalola mashkana v'chol darchei haTorah noam u'nesivaseha shalom. Right, the ways of the Torah are all pleasant. That's what it comes to. The ways of the Torah are pleasant and peaceful. So it sounds like, again, he's giving a reason that we should have Rachmanas on her. But that opens the door. But what if she doesn't need Rachmanas? She's not your garden variety almana, right? She's a Rockefeller. So it's not an issue. So that's why you could see that this gets, very, very hairy as to sometimes we, give a reason, sometimes we don't give a reason. Now, it's very, very important, and there's a Tosfos in the Seches Gittin that I want to read because we gave one example of the Almana. When we talk about Dorish Time Dekra, we just talk about the king's wives. There's another example we had not too long ago, last summer, in the 5th parak of Gittin, where the Gemara had a discussion about paying back, right? If you damage someone and you owe them money and you don't have money. So remember this, we had this also in Bava Kama in the first chapter many times. It's called Meitiv Sadehu. You have to pay someone Meitiv Sadehu. Okay? And the Gemara wants to know, what's the reason? Gemara says, there's a reason why we pay idis, meaning the person who damaged doesn't have cash. He has properties to pay. He has Madison Avenue, right? He's got Queens Boulevard, and then he's got South Bronx. He's got 3 different values that he owns. So the Torah says he's got to pay idis nechasef. He's got to pay back with his Madison Avenue property. Okay? Mipnei tikkun olam. Because of a tikkun olam. Titania, I'm reading from Gittin, Daf Mem Ted Amud Bet. Rab Shimon Omar, Rab Shimon Beima, Amar Hanazikin Shamin Lehen Be'idis. Why does someone who does damage have to pay back with his best property? Mibnei hagazlan and mibnei hachamsan, and because of the robbers. Kadesh yomer adam lamani goza lamani chomes. Right? Lamachar bezin yardin v'nichsen l'nichse v'notlin sada nashali. He says, you know what? I'm going to think twice. Right. This is what we call, right? It's like the whole death penalty discussion. Why do we give, right, death penalty as a deterrent? So too over here, the Torah had a deterrent and said, you know what? We want people to think twice before they commit crimes because they're going to have to pay back with the best of their property, right? So therefore, that's a good deterrent. Wow, it sounds like Rab Shimon, the Gemara says, this is Rab Shimon Latameh, who's Dorish Taimid Dikra. Okay, so this is a third example we're seeing where the Torah says something, right? And Rab Shimon is trying to figure out what's the reason. Okay, says a very, very important Tosfos on top, on them Testament Beis and Gittin. Tosfos says, Lo pligi elahechadika nafkusa. Rab Shimon pipes in all the time, and he says, I'm gonna figure out a reason for this prohibition, right? And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, we don't dorish time in the crow. Tosfos says, lo pligi ela hechadika nafkusa. There's only a machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rab Shimon when there's a nafkamina ladina, which in English means a halachic ramification comes out of this. Kigon, as Tosfos says, quotes our Gemara in Bava Metzia, chovel begad almana. When there's a halachic, rendering that could come out from this, like the almana. Well, maybe if she could afford it, maybe we could do it. So where we split it by the almana or by the king, right? Then we say, okay, there's a machlokes. So too over here, where there's a practical difference when it comes to how you pay back properties, then we could apply this machlokes, and that's the end of the Tosfos. And there's a big machlokes on this Tosfos because Tosfos leaves us hanging. Very interesting. Tosfos says where there's a nafkamina, then we say there's a machlokes, okay? But what about when there's no nafkamina? What if it's all theoretical? We don't know how the sentence ends. So believe it or not, if it's just theoretical and there's no halachic ramification that comes out whether we dorish time in the Torah or not, it's a machlokes between the Maharam and the Minchas Chinuch, whether or not everybody says we are dorish time in the Torah, or whether or not we are not dorish time in the Dikra. The Maharam says that shekavanatam shebamakum she'ein nafkamina vaday moda Rabbi Yehuda shedorish in time in Dikra. No, if there's nothing practical that comes out of this discussion, then even Rabbi Yehuda would say we're dorish time in Dikra. Kivan she'ein tam sheyachlaku ha'im nitne haTorah lidrosh tameh. Shema yazik esayah. Okay. Nevertheless, so that's fine because why? He says because it's a nice thing. Dorish time dikra. Says the Minchas Chinuch just the opposite. The Minchas Chinuch in Taf Sadik Dalid, 464. Do I have it over here? Yes. Minchas Chinuch in 464 says just the opposite. He says, we can't understand the Torah, right? Only God had vin darka. Only when there's an nafkamina ladina we're doresh. But when there's no nafkamina, says the Minchas Chinuch, we never dorish time at Dikra. We don't open up, so to speak, Pandora's box and start to debate, well, what did the Torah mean, what it didn't mean, because, says the Chinuch, we're going to get into trouble. All right? And that Chinuch, and that Minchas Chinuch is alluding to Sometimes the Gemara says that even though the reason doesn't apply anymore, we don't like to mess around. Yontif Sheni is a debatable topic that is somewhat related to this because we already know the calendar and there's no difference and there's no suffix Yoma, right? We like to keep things the way it is. We're not Dorish time of Dikra, right? We listen to the rabbis, they know best. And Gemara in Masechet Shabbos that talks about one rabbi who thought he was so smart and he ended up committing a muktzah on Shabbos in the first chapter of Shabbos. Not important for now, but that's what the Sefer Chinuch is actually alluding to. So that's one limitation. A second limitation is that we have a Tosas Harush. Okay, we had a few weeks ago on Daf Tzadi. Okay, the Tosas Harush brings down the Gemara. You remember when we were discussing Los Hachsham Shor B'Disho, right? You're not allowed to muzzle. So the Gemara had a very interesting question. The Gemara says, what if it's actually beneficial to muzzle the animal? Because let's say the animal had diarrhea, okay, and it wasn't supposed to eat that day. So there, the opposite holds true. If I don't muzzle the animal, then the animal could injure itself and die. So I'm doing the animal a favor, even though it doesn't know, but I'm doing the animal a favor by muzzling. So the Gemara says, what's the rule over there? Is it still committing? Are you still committing the act of lo sachsim shor b'disho? Are you committing a violation? So the Gemara says, well, it depends. So the Gemara itself actually has a conversation with itself and says, well, what's the reason why the Torah says that you can't do it? So the Tosas Harush says, over there, it's a no-brainer. Of course, the reason why you can't muzzle an animal is because you have to be nice, right? Remember, a pole's allowed to eat, an animal's allowed to eat. So this is called being nice. So if being nice most of the time means not muzzling the animal and let it eat a little bit here and there, that's saying being nice would mean to muzzle it so that it doesn't eat and it doesn't get sicker. So the Tosas Harush makes a brilliant point, and he says, in a case like that, everyone says your Dorish time of Dikra. Okay? Because that's a reasonable explanation, right? The Tosas Harush says, Elataimos Rabbi Yehudahu mishum shepshad hakasavu ben aniya ben ashira. Meaning, the problem by the Almana is that the Torah doesn't say anything. It just says, an Almana, it doesn't matter, yes money, no money, it doesn't matter across the board. It's so simple in the case, again, it's not simple by the Almana, it's simple by the animal. So because it's so simple by the animal, even Rabbi Yehuda would agree that the halacha would change if the situation changes. And that's really, really what this comes down to, is where we extend this law to have even Rabbi Yehuda agree. Just a couple of more points. I want to end off with the Rambam, because what does the Rambam have to say about this concept? There are some contradictory Rambams. One, he says in Mor Nevuchim, where he quotes the Gemara in Brachos, the famous Gemara that we all know. It says, "Ha'omer al kain tzipor yagiu rachamecha." Someone says that God should have compassion on you, like He has on a bird, referring to the concept of shiluach hakan, where you have to send away the mother bird because you don't want the mother bird seeing you taking the eggs. It's her children, right? It's the chicks. So most people would say, yeah, the reason why you have to shoo away the mother bird is because we have one of Rachmanos. Says the Mishnah, no. You're not allowed to say that, because what you're inferring is that there are reasons for the way God decides to rule the world and make these commandments. Who do you think you are, right, to ascribe reasons? Right? Says the Gemara in Brachos Lamed Gimel, Mishatkinoto, you silence this person. Whoa. The reason why we shoo away the mother bird has nothing to do with Rachmanos. You may think that it's a nice, right? It's a nice news story about how we have Rachmanos and animals, and we don't want the mom to see the kids getting kidnapped, it certainly makes sense on some logical level. But the truth is, these are gzeirus. We have no idea why the Torah says to do certain things. Because after all, we believe in karbanos and we shech animals all day long, right? But then again, you have oso vesbeno. So every time you have a nice story about Rahmanus, there'll be another mitzvah that contradicts that. So therefore, because we're all confused as to whether or not we have Rahmanus when it comes to animals, sometimes yes and sometimes no. Therefore, the Rambam says they're all a gzeira. He actually says that in more Nevuchim. Okay, the Ramban disagrees a little bit, and he says no, that there really are reasons. The Rambam says sometimes there really aren't reasons. And then there's a very famous Rambam all the way at the end of Hilchas Tamura, where he says, he's talking about Tamur, which is substituting one animal for another animal. He says, at the end, Afal Pisha Kol Chukei HaTorah Gzeiroshem, right? Even though at the end of the day, all of these laws are all gzeirot, we don't understand them. Ra'ui lehitbonen bahem. You know what? Just think about them for a while. It won't kill you. Just, try to think about them. Ten lo tam. If you could ascribe a reason that makes sense to you and makes you feel better, gesundheit. Right? After all, Shlomo HaMelech knew all the reasons of the Chukei HaTorah, right? And he goes on to explain what's the reason of Tumura. Tumura is a very, very obscure law when it comes to karbanos, where if I have an animal and I try to transfer the Kedusha, right, you're not allowed to, but if you do it, then both become Kadosh, v'hayahut mosiyah Kadosh. So the Rambam tries to give an explanation. And it's like he really doesn't want to, but it's like you're like kvetching him out of him. You're like dragging it out of him. The Rambam says, Yarda Torah l'sof machshevet ha'adam. Right? He says, because the Torah at the end of the day understands where we're coming from. Uktsas yitzro hara. And we have this yetzer hara sometimes that we just can't get rid of. Sheteva shaladam nota laharbas kinyano. We always want to get more and more. We want to buy. We want to amass fortunes. Lachas al mamono. And, we're just cheap at the end of the day. V'afal pisha nadar v'higdish. Even though I made it neder and I made my animal kodesh, efshar shachazar bo nichem. You know what? I didn't want to take my $1,000 ox and make it hegdish. I had a moment, right, where I was all excited. And then I'm like, oh my God, did I just do that? Right? Sometimes at a common occurrence, you go up, right? You're bidding on something, you want to buy Mafter Yonah. In the heat of the moment, right? You bid $3,500, right? 10 minutes later, you're like, okay, I got this. This aliyah is costing me $3,500, right? So we all get this spiritual injection, and then, a couple of minutes later, you lose it. And that's exactly what the Rambam says over here, right? Word for word. So therefore, you know what? He says, put your money where your mouth is. That's the concept of Tamura. So, there are other examples. 9 o'clock, we'll stop here. But just, as a conclusion, it's a very, very, murky topic. There's a lot of debate back and forth. But the conclusion is that most of the commentators say it's a good thing to try to understand the reasons why we do things to give us an impetus. The problem is when we're not sure and then we start building our own reasons, which means, in other words, justifications, kind of like my example about the red lights, then you could get into trouble because I don't think, whether you go through a red light at 2 a.m. or if you're speeding and you get caught and there's no cars around you, the pshetel you give to the cop about how there's no one here, and you're going to say the only reason why you can't speed, all right, and you start giving him a Gemara. The only reason why you can't speed is because it's a danger to other cars. What if there are no cars, right? And then you're starting to be Dorish time of Dekra. So it's a slippery slope.